I've covered this subject before, of course, many times, but sometimes I like to reiterate a video just because it can maybe take a different angle, or sometimes when you talk about a subject more than once, you can find retrospectively that you have covered different angles. So I think that's useful for a small creator sometimes. Um, I want to talk here about ideology in crime and justice. Uh, I have made no secret of the fact that on the subject of crime and justice, I am absolutely conservative, small c conservative. I say small c because I'm not talking about party conservative. And this doesn't negate my left leaning on other issues, but absolutely I'd call myself a conservative on this subject. Um, Put simply, I believe that people who hurt society, um, particularly crimes against the individual, really destructive crimes against the individual, I think such people have to be punished. And I believe absolutely, unequivocally, that punishment is part of justice. Now, I think the left attitude to this, let's say liberal left, there's sort of a knee-jerk response. They would say that the right have a knee-jerk response about punishment, but I would argue they have a knee-jerk response as well, which is always the first consideration is about how can we help the criminal, in the sense of how can we help them to get away from a life of crime, or how can we rehabilitate them, or how can we, um, it's all criminal focused. And I don't think it's that they don't sympathise with the victim. They probably do in most cases, but the priority is always about helping the criminal in some way. The conservatives knee jerk, or knee jerk if you will, but I'd say instinctive response to this is they've hurt someone, they have to pay a price. Now, I think I've long railed against our justice establishment. It really, frankly, it sickens me sometimes. I'm not saying that they always get it wrong. Sometimes, more often than not, judicial decisions are the correct ones. So I'm not saying that every single case that we have in this country results in a poor judgment. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think there's a problem. I think that the justice establishment, by which I mean the courts, the sentencing councils, respectively, in England and Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland's a different situation. I don't think they have their own sentencing council at the moment in Ulster. But that's what I mean by the justice establishment, and yes, the Ministry of Justice as well. I think it is arrogant. I think it's tone deaf, and I think it's this attitude where you get judges who sort of think they know best. To hell with public opinion, you know. Um, I don't say that justice should be determined by public opinion, because I don't want the lynch mob situation, but I don't think public opinion should be totally disregarded, which to a large extent it is at the moment. I mean, you hear the Court of Appeal say things like, well, it's not in the public interest, or the public would not accept it. But you also hear the Court of Appeal, or you see the Court of Appeal, ignoring public demands for tougher sentences in many cases, just ignoring it. Um, i.e., where there's been a case seen to be unduly lenient. Um, I think particularly the one area that really I find galling, well, there's two. I would highlight two. One is with young offenders, and the other is with dangerous drivers. I think in both cases you have overt leniency. Now, let's look at the first one, young offenders. I cited the experience I had in Sunderland recently, city centre, leaving the cinema with my friend, and we group of about 12 to 15 teenage boys, ranging in age from, I'd say the youngest was 13, 14, the oldest maybe 17, 18, right? So teenage boys throwing the weight around, just swearing at strangers, muttering stuff under their breath, just um, clearly up to no good, right? That's not That's not behaviour that isn't without malice. So I'm quite headstrong. I'm the sort of person that will answer back, but I'm also not reckless. I can't take on a whole gang, right? It would be putting myself in at risk. So we stepped to the side reluctantly. I mean, but I think that's disgusting. I think we have the fact that we have a situation in this country where teenage louts, and this is not a smear on all teenagers, but teenage louts can antagonize, can, no, that's the wrong word, can intimidate adults. It's disgusting. And there's a lot of theories about this fatherless homes. I think that's definitely shouldn't be dismissed. But there's other things as well. I think that we have this situation where both sentencing councils in Edinburgh and London are they take this attitude to young offenders, which is, oh, because of their age, we should not focus on the punishment. Well, if you have a group of young thugs who beat a father to death because he has told them off for vandalism, then what sort of message are you sending out if you're saying we don't want to focus on punishment and we'll just give them a community sentence? I strongly, staunchly believe that the problem with young offenders in this country is they have no fear. They just don't fear consequences. And that says something about our justice establishment. It infuriates me when you see a young offender go before a judge and they're given chance after chance after chance. It's infuriating because it's the public that's paying the price. Um, so that's one I particularly highlight. The other issue I mentioned, reckless driving. Now, I'm not talking about someone who does 40 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. I'm talking about someone who is drink driving, time and time again. They've got points on the license. They've been in trouble, but they keep doing it. And they don't care about the lives that they're putting at risk. And you get a situation where they might kill or seriously injure someone, and they're given a few years in prison. And this is the bit I find baffling. They're banned for driving for 8 years. Now, someone who, in my opinion, if they injure or kill someone, they should be banned for life. They should never, ever be allowed behind a driving wheel again. And if they do, they should be immediately arrested. That's how I feel about it. So why this non what bureaucrat came up with, let's give them a period of a ban, but not a lifetime ban. If they kill or seriously injure someone, they shouldn't be allowed behind a wheel again. That's an example. Um, but I do think that our legal establishment is these days, maybe not in the past, but certainly in the last few decades, there's definitely been a sway to the liberal left. I think it is ideological. Now, if the sentencing councils are pushed on that, they would say they're not partisan, they're not politically motivated, not party politically motivated, but I do think they are ideologically liberal left. And I've had, um, you know, communication with these people. I have a good idea of the way they think about things. Um, but more broadly, I just think that the left's attitude to crime is always this instinctive idea about rehabilitate first and just disregard the punishment. I would draw this comparison. The conservatives' attitude is crime, punishment, rehabilitation. The left leaning person's attitude is crime, rehabilitation, and they want to take out the punishment component completely. I think that's wrong. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's reckless. I think it's an insult to the victim. Um, and with all due respect to scholars who are talking about penal reform, they may have points about that, but they have to accept that the public want to see justice. In our prison system, which is overcrowded, there may well be people there that shouldn't perhaps be there. For example, people who, let's say, in a moment's stupidity, they issued a violent threat. Now, they should be punished for that, but should they be serving a longer time than someone who's actually committed an act of violence? I don't think so. Um, let's say you have a young offender who violently assaults someone. I would say they're more deserving to be in prison than someone who, in a moment's madness, said, "I'll kill you," online to someone because they were being stupid and reckless. I mean, the nuances and the context of each case really need to be looked at, and I'm not convinced that it is. Judges have to look at aggravating and mitigating circumstances. I think age is too often used as an excuse. A 16-year-old knows right from wrong, so I don't think they should be, unless they have severe learning difficulties, they know right from wrong, so I don't accept that they should be treated with cotton wool. If they have seriously hurt someone, and I'm not talking about them defending themselves or something like that, I'm talking about just like sheer spite and maliciousness. They've hurt a stranger. They should go to the Young Offenders Institute for a very long time. The public have a right to be safe. So I am very frustrated and disillusioned with our justice system. They don't always get it wrong, but there's liberal left people in this country would love us to emulate the Netherlands or the Nordic countries as if it's, they don't have crime problems. Actually, they do. Sweden is now the gun violence capital of Europe outside of Eastern Europe. It has a real problem. So the Nordic sort of experiment in leniency towards crime, I'm not convinced that has been a resounding success. And I also often wonder about that. I wonder how, I'm sure a victim of crime in Norway or Sweden or Denmark or Finland, I'm sure they want justice as much as anyone else. So I can't imagine they're overly happy that a violent criminal would just get a few years and, hotel like accommodation. I can't imagine that a victim of crime in Norway or Sweden is going to be any less angry than a victim of crime in Britain. It's heralded as a great model. I'm not so sure that it is actually. But if we look at, okay, let's look at the United States, the Democrats. I want Harris to win. I think Trump's awful, but the Democrats cannot shout about crime. They've been a lot more assertive in taking on the issue of gun violence, and I credit them for that. But they can't boast about crime because the fact of the matter is most of America's big cities are run by Democrats and they have a serious crime problem. Now, Harris has to address that. Um, yes, she came from a prosecuting background, as did Starmer, but the left's attitude, the left's record on crime is nothing to shout about. And I would just like to see, instead of this sort of instinctive thing about they hear about a crime and it's immediately what we need to rehabilitate. We need to, if it's a young offender, we need to find them something to do. The left seem to be allergic to the concept of punishment, and I do not accept that it is punitive. I mean, anyone who's ever been through serious crime knows the anxiety that causes. They know the mental anguish that causes. The absolute horrible feeling that a stranger has hurt you for no good reason. It's really awful. Every case has to be looked at its own merit, of course, and I'm not calling for a lynch mob situation, because this is the other thing. They'll often say, "Oh, you just want the right just want revenge." That's nonsense. Punishment is not revenge. Punishment is legally the right approach to those who hurt society. Judicial punishment absolutely has a place. Without it, how is the offender going to, see that they're being held to account? Because I think without punishment, the offender is enabled. I really believe that. And I'm going to wrap this up, but I have black and white views on the concept of holding someone to account for their crime. It has to be proven, they have to have due process, and aggravating and mitigating factors must be considered. But what I find sickening is when there is a crime, it's definitely happened, the person is guilty, they've shown no remorse, and a judge still gives them a tap on the wrist, and they've had previous offences. That makes my blood boil. Um, I do think a lot of judges in this country are tone deaf. I do believe that. I believe the sentencing councils are tone deaf. I believe the Ministry of Justice is tone deaf. Um, and Cooper's putting this priority on non-crime hate incidents. People want reassurance that thugs and violent criminals are going to be held to account, which means arresting them, putting them on trial, um, finding them guilty if they are guilty, and putting them in prison so the public can be safe. I think we need much tougher penalties for young offenders. Instead of constant excuses, I've said before, if someone has a heroin addict mother and a burglar for a father, they're not going to have a good start in life. Goes without saying. So absolutely the root causes have to be tackled. But after the fact, once a crime has been committed, they have to be punished. And you cannot have a situation, well, we have the situation where teenagers are threatening the public. Here's another thing. They threaten other teenagers. So this isn't about vilifying young people, because some of their main victims are other young people. So I do think there is a fundamental gulf between ideology between the liberal left and conservatives. And on this issue, I'm definitely conservative, because I think there's no excuses for terrorizing society. There just isn't. Having a hard life, having a difficult background isn't an excuse to terrorize strangers. And I'm sick and tired of the liberal left advocating leniency. Like I say, there may be some circumstances where that is merited, but in many cases where there's no remorse, and where you have to factor in the effect that has had on the victim, then I say jail is absolutely appropriate. Not in of itself, you have to have rehabilitation afterwards, and you have to have a process where there is hope of reforming them if they show genuine remorse. But this idea the left has that punishment has no place, it's just nonsense. If you can't accept that people who hurt society shouldn't be punished, then you don't believe in justice, in my opinion. I think it's an oxymoron to say, I believe in justice, but I'm against punishment. Please, spare me. It's how can you have justice without punishment? It's nonsensical. It's like saying to the criminal, you've done this terrible thing, but you're not going to be held to account for it. We're just going to try and get you to see the light. It's absolutely stupid, and it's reckless, and it's immoral. A just society is one in which bad people are held to account for what they've done.